Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Big Sandy Community and Technical College and the University of Pikeville, we welcome you to our 8th annual Unity March celebration commemorating Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Our panel discussion today, our title is Dreams in Motion. I want to give you a little bit of a background about Big Sandy and UPIKE and how we started this. Big Sandy's diversity, equity, and inclusion team began the Unity March 8 years ago with the late elder Jean Lane, who had a passion to bring the community members together to engage in keeping Dr. Dreams alive and working together as a community. After Elder Jean Lane passed, his sister Legina Lane and I wanted to keep the Unity March going. There we began partnerships with the University of Pikeville, the City of Pikeville, and the United Methodist Church. And so today we have one of our partners with us who partnered on this event today. I would like to introduce you to Katrina from UPIKE.
Hello, I am so happy to be here. Thank you, Tina. I am the new Director of Diversity at the University of Pikeville. This is my 6th month, and it is so wonderful and exciting to be a part of this legacy that was started between the University of Pikeville and Big Sandy. I'm also really grateful that we have some great panelists in front of you today, and I'm looking forward to finding ways that we can build upon this legacy, and so grateful that Big Sandy was ready to pivot to a panel discussion, which is not new to them, and so that we can bring this awesome panel to you today.
Thank you, Katrina. At this time, I would like to introduce you to our panelists and let them tell you who they are, and then we will start our panel discussion. And after our panel discussion, if you have questions, if you would like to ask questions, please raise your hand and we will make sure we're watching the chat to engage that as well. So we will first start with Stefan Morales.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Stefan Morales. I am a UPIKE graduate, and I am currently employed by the University of Pikeville. I'm originally from Kissimmee, Florida. It's a small town right outside of Orlando, Florida. Came to UPIKE back in 2011. Graduated with my undergraduate in communications in 2015. Returned home for about 4 years and taught high school until I got into the college coaching world. That world took me all over the United States. I coached while I interned at University of Texas, Austin, and also at UCLA. Then I landed a coaching job, offensive coordinator job at a JUCO in North Dakota. I was there for about 6 months until I landed right back here at good old University of Pikeville as a graduate assistant. Spent 6 months there, and then good old COVID hit. Had to make some real money, got into the Office of Admissions. And that's where I'm at now. Fast forward 2 years, I actually got my master's in business administration in about 10 months from the University of Pikeville. And I am currently an admissions counselor. I recruit out of Northern Kentucky, the Cincinnati area, and basically all over the Southeast.
Thank you, Stefan. Agus?
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for having me here. It's an honor to be here, to be with all of you today. I just want to introduce myself. My name is Agus. Okay, it's not easy sometimes to pronounce it. The correct pronunciation is Agus. If you see goose, that's me. Okay, so many people sometimes it's not, to call my name. Some people sometimes call me Agus, August, even some actually call me Angus. So that's okay. I am originally from Indonesia. I came to United States in 1997, about 25 years ago. I graduated from UK and then started my job at Big Sandy Community and Technical College in 2007. I'm teaching biology. I'm teaching anatomy and physiology most of time. And I have one wife and 3 kids. Okay, not the other way. One wife, 3 kids. I live in Pennsville, West Vanderbilt, Johnson County. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Agus. Next, we have Rodney.
Good afternoon. I am honored and humbled to share the platform with such esteemed guests. I am a professor at Miami University. I teach in critical race and ethnic studies. I urge anyone that would like to find out a little bit more about me, simply Google me and I will appear.
Thank you, Rodney. And next, we will have John Rosenberg.
Hello, everybody. I'm John Rosenberg. I'm a lawyer in Prestonsburg, which is also the site of Big Sandy Community College. My wife and I, Jean, who worked at the college and ran the program for single moms there for many years before she retired. We moved here, I guess, close to about 50 years ago. I had worked for 7 years in the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, addressing issues of discrimination in the South, and was involved in a number of major trials there. And when we left in about 1970, it appeared there was an opportunity to come to Eastern Kentucky where legal services agencies had not yet come to rural areas in most of the country. And I had been approached by a friend who I'd worked with in the Civil Rights Division. He was then the Director of Legal Services at the Office of Economic Opportunity, and suggested we come here to begin basically the Legal Services Agency. Legal Services then was one of the programs that had been started by the Office of Economic Opportunity in the War on Poverty in 1965. And so we came here and spoke to folks locally and people like Harry Caudle and Joe Begley over in Blackie to learn that there were a number of particular issues relating to poverty in Appalachia, especially those related to the coal industry and environmental damage from surface mining and black lung disease and mine safety, and along with many of the poverty related issues that people encounter every day in consumer protection, family law, housing, and disability benefits. So back then it looked like it was a great opportunity for me to use experience I'd learned in the Department of Justice to help start a first-class law firm here for poor people, folks with low incomes who did not yet have access to lawyers. And lots of people are not aware that their problems are legal issues that can be solved, at least addressed by the lawyers. So that was the beginning of sort of a 50. I was the director of that agency for over 30 years. And that was now 20 years ago. And since then, I've practiced partly with the local plaintiffs firm, Pillarsdorf Law Offices, with counsel, and I've spent most of my time with nonprofit agencies and others that are other groups that are interested primarily in helping to address issues of low income and poverty in our region.
Thank you, John. Katrina, do you want to start with the panel discussions?
Yeah, sure. But first, let me just say I wanted to acknowledge that we do have someone who may be joining us later, and that is Braxton Whitmore. He is a Kentucky State trooper and an alum from the University of Pikeville, I believe. I could be wrong, but I do know that he is a former athlete as well as a local educator, Whitney Youngblood Nelson. Whitney's not feeling well, so we will not have her today, but we will definitely welcome Braxton should he join us later in this webinar. So the first question that I have is for Stefan Morales. And Stefan, during the civil rights movement, oftentimes people found themselves in a situation where they had to be pioneers of change as the only one or one of very few doing something where persons of color were not typically seen. As an African-American male and former student athlete who attended a PWI, which is a predominantly white institution in Eastern Kentucky, what were some challenges you faced and overcame? And what is your advice to students in your same situation that will help keep Dr. King's dream in motion?
I would say the biggest challenge that I faced would most likely be the culture shock in itself. Coming from Kissimmee, right outside of Orlando, I'm used to a big town. My high school and my graduating class was 800 strong. The person in front of me and behind me in the graduation line, I literally met at graduation rehearsal, and we went to the same high school for the past 4 years. So to come from that to a university where it tops out probably about 1,200, yeah, it was a big culture shock for me. Just everyday living, finding the right hair care products, finding a barbershop, or finding the correct spices that we cook with. My community that I'm from is very, very Caribbean. I'm actually Puerto Rican and Black, so I cook with a lot of different Caribbean spices and stuff like that, and we don't have that. There isn't that stuff up here. There's a lot of different spices and things that I ask people for in Food City or Walmart, and they've never heard of it. But it's just the region. There's stuff here that people cook. Like before I came up here, I've never heard of soup beans. I don't know what that is. They don't have that in Kissimmee or down south, to be honest with you. But in this region, that is something that's very, very common. So to be honest, I would say the biggest culture shock or the biggest challenge for me was the culture shock in itself, just finding everyday materials. And again, like the hair care products. It's hard to find a good barber. So one thing I could say is for people that's coming or going to a PWI, don't be afraid, because that's the whole thing. What is the reason to be afraid of? It's just something brand new. You'll be fine. If I was able to go 13 hours away from home, trust me, you'll be fine. You just have to find you a group of friends, and that's what I did. It's a group of us, about 13 to 15 of us. We talk every single day in the group chat. Those are my brothers. We met up here, and we all came from all over the United States, to be honest with you. And we're all men of color. So we were all in the same boat, put in the same situation, and we survived. So just like Dr. King said, we will survive in numbers, and that's literally what you have to do. You find people that look like you, that literally think the same as you, and you will adapt, you will survive. So that's probably the biggest challenge I faced was probably the culture shock itself, and then finding our own entertainment, because I'm gonna be honest, around here, it's a lot of country music and stuff. So I don't too much listen to country music or anything like that, but we found entertainment in going up to Kentucky State University, K-State University. That's where we found a lot of stuff that we could relate to. So that was mostly the biggest challenges that we faced up here.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that information. And just really, I think that one thing that you said is not being afraid to continue to forge relationships, and having 13 people that you still connect with. That's powerful. Tina?
Thank you. Agus, can you share more about Islamophobia, and how and in what ways do you hope that the nation grows or starts addressing next in being more inclusive and keeping Dr. King's dream alive?
Okay, thank you very much, Tina. This is kind of a, sometimes it's kind of sensitive questions for some people, but I'll try to, to explain this a little bit. I am teaching biology, so Islamophobia is not really my, expertise. So, but I try, and I'm very grateful and also thankful that Dr. King's have motions and dreams that not only actually benefits the people in color, like African American, but also is really benefits people with religion, with different religion, with the minority religion like a Muslim. So it's very glad, and I'm very thankful for this movement that Dr. King's have had, and also the dream that he has. So for the Islamophobia in United States, I believe the same like you, mostly reading the information, the news, and thankfully, it is very fortunate that I live in the area that I have a very, good neighborhood, people that love us, and the neighbor that really good, the college, and other people over here. And we also have several kind of involvements with, I know Rob sometimes come to our mosque in Prestonburg, Josh Stecker, and Big Sandy also really involved, in knowing us as a religion, Muslim over here. And myself and my family don't have a lot of, we hear about many incidents about Islamophobia, hatred, maybe mosque vandalisms, and etc. But ourselves, we don't really have incident. That's very fortunate for us. We have some when we still live in Lexington several years ago, when when our mosque was burned, But from that incident, actually, we as a Muslim in Lexington at that time actually able to build even a bigger building for that mosque that have been burned, and now it's become schools called the Lexington Universal Academy, which is a school not only for Muslim actually, but other people can also go to that schools to get education, and especially to know more about Islam. So things that I really hope that in these United States they learn more, especially people learn more about Islam from the right source, not from the news. And I mentioned before that we have some movement with other religion in Lexington, especially, and also here, that we invite people, and sometimes they also invite us to come to the church to to give information about what is Islam and to know what is Islam actually. And I like to also invite all of you to come to our mosque, which is located in the Little Hills, a little mosque in the Prestonburg area. We have a prayer, which is a Friday prayer when Muslim gather together around 2 p.m. every Friday. So starting at 2 p.m. every Friday. So welcome to our mosque. We invited you and see what is Islam about. And also one more thing that maybe is sometimes people don't really understand about the Sharia. So we pray. We also have a weekly gathering, and we also have two celebration, which is Islam celebration. In most of the United cities, they don't really recognize this celebration. But in New York, for example, New York City, they already make this celebration as a holiday for the state. So it's really helpful for Muslim during that holiday. They can, really celebrate their day. So I hope in other states, in other cities, we also have that kind of things that we can celebrate our religious holidays with other people from other states. Thank you very much, Tina. I hope it's answered your question.
You did. Thank you, Agus. Thank you so much. Katrina?
Okay. The next question is for Dr. Coates. Dr. Coates, education is key to keeping Dr. King's dream in motion. However, research shows us that overall African-American males attend college less, are retained less, and as such have a lower rate of degree attainment than other groups. As a higher education professional, using your expertise, what are the best practices to attract, enroll, retain, and graduate African-American males? And also, can you please share some examples of how you have contributed to the success of African-American males in your respective role?
Thank you, and it's a great question. First of all, we just completed a STEM NSF grant, and in that grant, we identified the following research. Not only Black and Black males, but women, people with disabilities, Latinos, Hispanics, American Indians, and Alaskan natives have all been identified as underrepresented in our colleges, and in particularly in STEM and in STEM graduates. But we have spent so much time trying to transform and reform and reconstruct the student. And we spent very limited time in trying to transform and reform the institution. Research documents, for example, that enhanced teaching methods improve the accessibility of our courses, particularly for underrepresented groups. Supporting and encouraging diverse students in our classroom challenges faculty to pursue new opportunities. There's clear research that documents how reduced social belonging rather than preparedness to handle the material accounts for the departure of underrepresented students. But we also know that if we look at such things as develop and implement curriculum that embraces and empowers underrepresented students, enhance underrepresented students' interest in the area by improved competency and retention rates, and also to equip our faculty to adopt inclusive teaching practices. Let me give you just one case in point. Pick up any standard textbook in any area, from law to political science to the social sciences, biology, so forth and so on, and tell me what image is most likely to be reflected. Whose ideas are most likely to be central? If I ask students who are the key thinkers, who are the key lawyers, who are the key poets, who are the key artists, they're all white males. The implication is that there never was a Black artist, or there never was a Asian artist, or there never was a Islamic philosopher, so forth and so on. There was nothing ever done by these groups, at least based upon our standard textbooks. So part of the problem means to change the way that we work, the way we think, the way that we teach. All right, creating an inclusive curriculum results in embracing students. Let me give you a case in point. Again, I teach at Miami University, and for years I've taught a course in the summer that attracts a good number of students. Well, this year I was contacted by the football, well, a few years ago, 7, 8 years ago, by the football program. And they had this football player that they just had to make sure that they could play so that we could win, so that we could then make our way to the bowl game, okay? This student was having difficulty. And I said, no, I'm not gonna let him in my class. And they had never had a faculty member say no before, you know, and they said, why? I said, because he's not going to pass. And they said, well, how do you know? He's not even, I said, the record is, he's got a record of not passing, all right? And they said, well, what do we have to do to get him in your class? Because it was the only class that they could take at that point. I said, I tell you what, if you will guarantee that the student will be studying 2 to 3 hours for each hour he's in my class, and during that studying, he is taking notes, and he is in class, and he is taking notes, then I will make sure that he's successful. All right, my course was a 4-hour course. They had to guarantee that this student was going to be studying 8 to 12 hours per, okay? They did that. We worked, we created. The course, he was quite successful, made the dean's list that summer, the team, so forth and so on. And then what? 2 years passed, 3 years passed, and I asked him, the coaches, well, how did that guy did? They said he flunked out of the university as soon as the football semester was over. I said, that's bull crap. I'll let you all fill in that 4-letter word, okay? All right, and we started diligently to transform the institution. We did not create a remedial program, by the way. We created a course that's more intense than even our honors program students take. And we did a course higher than an honors program course for football players, and particularly Black male football players that have the highest failure rate. And the football coaches and athletic departments guaranteed that those students would be in class every day and that they would be studying, okay? Oh, and something else we discovered. Most of the time, they would start working these students out physically in the morning, 8, 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. Then after a few hours of workout, then they go to class, then they come back and practice. Then they would try to study at the end of the day when they're exhausted. We flipped that whole script, okay? We had them take their courses and their studying before they worked out and before they practiced. Well, needless to say, those students for now 8 years, our GPAs for football players has gone up every year. And every year their graduation rate is going up. And oh, by the way, we actually did make it to a bowl game this year and won it, okay? All right, what does that mean? That means that if we make the course inclusive, all right, and oh, by the way, one other thing that we found out is that in many of our schools, particularly the only person of authority or teaching that the students see is a white person or a white female, all right? Seeing someone like yourself, all right, teaching and in the curriculum, so forth and so on, this is Black, this is female, so forth and so on, improves the likelihood that you will be connected in that course. Past that, using material that shows the students themselves, all right, in the sciences, in the math, in physics, so forth and so on, increases the likelihood that they can be successful. Last bottom line is this: we can keep trying to fix the student and wind up failing the student, or we can fix the institution and transform the process.
Thank you, Dr. Coates. I'm going to deviate a little bit and ask Stefan, as a former athlete, what do you think about what Dr. Coates said about flipping the structure of athletics? Did you find that, you know, the example that he gave you was similar? And would it be helpful as a former athlete to have that schedule flipped so that you could be the best?
Yeah, I believe Dr. Coates actually hit the nail on the head, because I always joke all the time that, hey man, y'all remember we used to have those 5:30 a.m. workouts. That's all the way through the year. Wake up 5:30 in the morning, go lift, maybe run, and then possibly have to catch an 8 a.m. class. Sometimes it's a lab. After that lab, you got to go to some type of football meeting or some type of sport meeting. And that's something a lot of kids and a lot of students and a lot of administrators don't realize, that those student athletes being in that sport is a full-time job. So like Dr. Coates said, at the end of the day, when we go to study hall and when we have time to do our studies, we're literally physically and mentally exhausted. So how am I supposed to focus on my studies when I've been up since 5 in the morning, going 100 miles an hour, you know? So for everything to be flipped, for the studies to be first, I believe that I believe in that. Yeah, that would help out a lot. That would generate a lot better. Because then once you get your studies done, all you have to worry about is your sport, is going to practice or something like that. You don't have to worry about, oh man, I still gotta study for this big test tomorrow. Maybe you do, but you know, you have everything else done. You don't have to worry about your meetings or anything like that. So yeah, I believe that would help, flipping the whole script like that.
Thank you, Stefan. And Dr. Coates, you also hit on some of the things that I think is very important as a shared equity model, is that in that you didn't just take on the student, you brought other individuals into the process to help create a supportive infrastructure for athletes that came your way. Okay, thank you. Tina?
Thank you. Mr. Rosenberg, this question is for you. As a Holocaust survivor, you have experienced the atrocities of hate towards Jewish people. As you look at today's society, are we at risk of repeating the mistakes of the past? What can we individually and/or collectively do to make sure we do not repeat our past mistakes and continue towards progress?
Well, let me do my best with that. But first, I wanted to mention to Dr. Coates, if he understands going to be at your convocation, I hope he can stop over and see when you were speaking about STEM education, that we have a terrific Eastern Kentucky Science Center here that we were able to build on the campus of Big Sandy, with a planetarium and some wonderful facilities. That's a terrific resource for students in this area and really from other parts of the state. And it's still in some ways a well-kept secret, right, Tina? But hopefully you'll have a chance to stop by. Getting to the question, I think we are right now unfortunately at a dangerous period in our country where we are seeing more right-wing rhetoric, more anti-Semitic incidents, more racial incidents. And so it seems to me, on the one hand, we can say there's been certainly a lot of progress in the sense that for years after the Civil Rights Movement, or as a result of the Civil Rights Movement, we've had the Voting Rights Act of 1965. We've had thousands of Blacks registered throughout the South that were not able to do that. And Black officials that elected throughout the South, and having really, and women and minorities represented in Congress and at our highest levels, including Vice President of the United States at the moment. At the same time, we've learned that incidents that took place in Charlottesville in 2017, we just had a successful trial. I was so very proud of the trial team that won that $24 million verdict after putting together a lawsuit against the right-wing groups that were responsible for that terrible incident. It's more than an incident in Charlottesville in which a young woman was killed. But what this trial team learned, and incidentally, they're a trial team of all women. It took several weeks to go through that trial, and they obtained a $24 million verdict, which they are now going to enforce. I think those sorts of efforts, the fact that they took on that case didn't have the FBI to investigate for them, and it's now become, I think, a model for other prosecutions, trials of that effort. We see these anti-Semitic incidents, just like the recent one, in the synagogues themselves, including the one in Colleyville, Texas, that just took place 3 days ago. And whether that was in just a single individual, unfortunately, but we've learned that these sorts of events are most of the time have been well planned. One of the things these women learned in that trial in Charlottesville was that might have appeared to people to have just been something that came up out of on that particular day, that people were suggested they show up, white ringers and anti-Semitic folks just showed up. It wasn't that way at all. It was planned years in advance. And the same thing, of course, with which we've learned on the January 6th assault on our Capitol, that same sort of mindset. So I think what is important is for us to speak out, take actions like that trial, raise our consciousness about the history of racial incidents in the past. And we can do that even in a small way in the communities where we live. Here in Floyd County, our local chapter of Kentuckians for the Commonwealth, we've begun a community remembrance, a community remembrance group that is devoted to trying to restore and reckon with the racial history in this region, which included lynchings right here in Floyd County, in Perry County, in Breathitt County, and in Pike County. And if we're going to build a future that is meaningful, in which all citizens are protected, we have to look at the past, and we have to raise up those histories and remember the words of Dr. Coates when he said, look at the textbooks. What you see in those textbooks are only white males. It's absolutely true. And in order to, I think, really affect meaningful change, we have to do those little things, like not so little, but we learned about lynchings in this area, been well kept secret. No, certainly it's nice not to be able to really talk about them, but that history pervaded this area. I mean, we know many Black families came to this area from Alabama back in the early days to mine coal because they were looking for a better life. And it probably was better than the Alabama that they left. But we know that when Black miners were able to help build a swimming pool in Wheelwright, after they built the pool, they were not allowed to swim there for many years. And we had and it's those sorts of things that, and so now you have Tina grew up in Wheelwright, right? Tina, I think so. And knows that history. Now there are
Yes.
Black families living there, but in some ways it's also a very rich history. And I think that's very important to do. And so in our remembrance project, we recently cleaned up a formerly Black cemetery. And we learned that some of those graves where we uncovered markers were enslaved in that area with local families. We have much more history to develop there. And we want to do that. And it's going on also in Perry County and Hazard, where Emily Hudson's developing a museum of Black history, and in Corbin, which had some very serious, unfortunate Black incidents in the past. So I guess there's not a short answer. I do think we're at a period in our history. This is a great country, and President Martin Luther King said the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And what we have to look for is a just society. And it takes all of us, as some small steps, some larger steps. But I think something like the Community Remembrance Project, being aware of the history of Indigenous people in this country, and the fact that the Trail of Tears and the discriminatory practices that this country took against the Indians throughout that were in this country in the 1800s and moved them all to reservations. And now we're learning about the graves in boarding schools. We have to learn that history to be able to build a good future for all of us in the future.
Thank you, John. Katrina?
Yeah, so since Braxton is not here, I'm actually going to build upon what John he touched on a couple things. And this question I will send to Dr. Coates. You know, you talked about you open up a book and you see history books and you see a white male and a white female, and you know, John just recently said in his last comments that we have to know our history. Tell me what your thoughts are on the critical race theory. Yeah, the kaboom.
How much time do you have? Okay, let me.
Well, you'll have a little time tomorrow because we'll have you
Yeah.
tomorrow in convocation. But if you could touch upon it, that would be great.
Interestingly enough, my new book project is entitled Critical Race Theory and the Search for Truth. And let me tell you how I began with that. Currently, and over the last 8-9 years, there's been a battle raging in this country over what is truth. On the one hand, there are those that believe that in 1492, Columbus sailed the blue and discovered America. And they invested in this country, this great democratic system that led to the greatest country in the world documenting freedom and justice and the American way. That's one story. And that story, by the way, the 1776 story that discovers Blacks as slaves and discovers the Native Americans only briefly, and then the Civil Rights Movement and so forth and so on, is one story. There's another story that talks about in 1492, a group of Arawakian natives discovered Christopher Columbus hopelessly lost. And when he confronted them and tried to label them as Indians because he thought that he was in India, they informed him, no, we are Arawakians. We are the people. What is strange about that is that to this day, many refer to the people, these indigenous people, as being Indians. So what is critical race theory? Critical race theory is a method of looking at history from the vantage point of multiple people and peoples. For example, the history of America is different if you ask the Arawakians, or if you ask the Nigerian, or if you ask the Puerto Rican, or if you ask the German Jews that were escaping Auschwitz, a totally different history. The history is totally different if we go back in that history and find out, well, at what point in time was race discovered in America? Because you see, in 1492 and in 1776, we did not know about whites and blacks and reds. But something happened in a place called Virginia, called Bacon's Rebellion, where a group of Black servants and a group of Irish servants did something very strange. They got together and planned an insurrection. They shut down the ports throughout Virginia, and no cotton and no tobacco and no sugar cane left those ports. During the same period of time, the Native Americans also attacked the community. And all of a sudden, the white planter elite found themselves on threats with both Black and Irish servants, and at the same time, Native Americans, and they came up with an interesting solution. They convinced the Irish that they were white. And by convincing the Irish that they were white, they elevated them a half a step above the Black servants, and they made them sheriffs and supervisors. And by creating this mythological structure called race, they unified whites as a group, and then created this racial hegemonic structure that we currently live with. And so this battle between the 1776 project and the 1619 project that we currently see across this country is, and I'll complete it with this, is like the story of Our Gang, those of us who are old enough to remember the TV series, versus Sesame Street. Our Gang, by the way, that has the one Black who rarely talks, surrounded by whites, versus Sesame Street, that has every color, every group, every gender group, so forth and so on, represented. The question for us in CRT and the rest of America is, which vision of America do we want? Do we want to make America white again? That's the MAGA movement, and go back in time. Or do we want to move forward? Do we want Our Gang, or do we want Sesame Street? Do we want we the people? That's all the people that have come to these shores one way or another to work together to make this democracy a reality? Or do we want to preserve a myth? That's what CRT is about.
Thank you, Dr. Coates. I see that we have Mr. Braxton Whitmore with us. And we have our, let's see, we may have more questions, and definitely Dr. Coates, we want you to expand more on that, where you were sharing your perspective, because we need to get that more in-depth knowledge. But I want to go to Mr. Braxton Whitmore. Thank you for joining us on this cold, snowy day in Pikeville. I'm sure as a state trooper, you've been very busy, or you could have been very busy today. So our question to you and to any other panelist who wants to join in, let me pull it up. Dr. King could be seen in the midst of violent situations advocating against the brutality of Black people, such as lynching and other acts of violence. The Black Lives Matter movement began to raise awareness of the disproportionate number of deaths of Black people at the hands of law enforcement. What does the purpose of the movement mean to you as a Kentucky state trooper? And how do you use your role to fight against injustices, inequities, injustice, and keep Dr. King's dream in motion?
That's a really good question. Let me pause real quick on the question itself and just kind of give everybody a brief rundown of who I am, because they know Braxton Whitmore, the guy who showed up late to the Zoom, but. Busy night, sorry, once again, got in late. But my name is Braxton Whitmore, of course. I'm gonna jump back on the topic. I won't talk long.
No, I apologize for not introducing you.
No, you're okay. My name is Braxton Whitmore. I am originally born in Poto, Oklahoma. It's a small little town. Not many people might not know it. I had moved there from Poto, Oklahoma when I was probably 2 or 3, and come to rural Eastern Kentucky. I live with my grandparents, older Caucasian grandparents, and I set out and done stuff in the farm. She was real in the Bible Belt, so we went to church, and I guess at a young age, I never really knew that I was different. I guess in the community, I was different. Nobody looked at me different, and me being a minority in Eastern Kentucky, around me and my cousins was the only minorities raised by my mother's side of the family, so we didn't think nothing much different. Well, I grew up in Eastern Kentucky my whole life. Met some very great people. Still live here to this day. Went through high school, played football, was able to get a scholarship to the University of Pikeville. So that's how I kind of got ties to the University of Pikeville and to some of the great people I have met at the University of Pikeville or Pikeville, Kentucky. Got to university in 2015. Played football through to 19. At that time, I got my bachelor's degree in criminal justice, bachelor's of science, and then didn't really know what I was wanting to do after, but I knew I wanted to serve in some type of way for the citizens of Kentucky, and then the people. Then I was able to attend the Kentucky State Police Academy in 2020 and graduate following January. So I've been a trooper now since, I guess, January, probably a year now. I've been out and alone. I really like it. I still keep in touch with the people at the university. The great guys. Chris Robinson, Adam Lanos, Mandy Stacy. I know some of them's watching right now. Rob Music. Great individuals alone that do anything for you. But for me, in reference to the question, I guess, so I can jump back into, it's different for me. The past is the past. It is. There's nothing we can change on that. But the things we can learn from that. And being a minority, especially in the role I am as a trooper in law enforcement, I guess the stereotypical thing is, state trooper, law enforcement, the white trooper comes and just does whatever. But my thing is I try to change the outlook on how police in general is just looked at now. I tell people all the time, what's done is done, but now we move forward, if that makes sense for people. What was the rest of that question and all?
I mean, you're doing fine. It was what does the purpose of the movement mean to you? That's the Black Lives Matter movement as a state trooper, and how do you use your role to fight against inequities and injustice and keep Dr. King's dream in motion?
Yeah, my thing is for the movement itself is just be understanding and hear, not just be one. I'm not one-sided. I'm not a one-sided person. I get I'm a trooper by title, but I'm still a father, a friend, a husband, a son. And if I wasn't in this, such a role, I'd want somebody to hear my side of the story. If I was getting done wrong, or also I can be the voice for the person speaking, and maybe try to calm down a certain situation if it's getting kind of out of hand, to speak to somebody that I know that might have some more power to help. And my thing is just to advocate. Martin Luther King is a huge role model for me, for what he done and what he had to sacrifice. To kind of jump off Martin Luther King and his era was more of like a Nina Simone and James Brown kind of situation, more of an artistic kind of way, and how they use their movement as well to get through music to talk to people. So my thing is just to keep Martin Luther King's memory going and just educate people. So a lot of the younger generation doesn't really, know about him and stuff. And just be a listener, I guess you could say. Just be a listener. I like more or less listen to people and then try to solve, because everybody's problems won't be fixed in one day. It's not. I live in a reality world, not a dreamland. So to try to listen and just understand what certain people are going through, because we all fight different battles, especially in this movement of injustice and inequality and stuff.
Thank you, Braxton. Tina, I'm going to turn it back over to you, but it looks like given our time, we may only have enough time for question number 3 on the next list, and then we can move into our Q&A.
Okay. Is this question going to be for every one of the panelists? The question is, what is one way in which people would work toward change and community transformation?
Anybody can jump in at any point.
John, you are on mute. I'm sorry.
Well, I would just encourage all of us to be involved as much as possible. I've seen that when citizens work together, for example, the board I've been very proud to be a part of is our Floyd County Homeless Shelter we started a few years ago. But I know that all these folks are busy and give of their time and money, and have created a wonderful small institution where we can put up homeless folks, especially when you think about it in this weather. And I think about the animal shelter, the same story. And I think about our Floyd County Community Foundation here, which I know there's one in Pikeville, and there's the larger foundation for Appalachian Kentucky. But here in the Community Foundation, by raising some money, we've been able to help businesses and individuals and low-income groups through this pandemic, and every little bit helps. So I would say try to involve yourself as much as possible. There are a whole lot of people out there that are worse off than we are. We're very fortunate to be in our situation, and use your time to try to help those others.
Let me piggyback on what John just said. I find it interesting that when people talk about Martin Luther King, they end, it seems like, with his dream. That was not what ended his life. What ended Martin Luther King's life was when he went past race and began looking at the systemic problems, not only race, but also economic, that kept us apart. What made him dangerous was when he organized the Poor People's March on Washington. The Poor People's March on Washington that recognized that poor whites, as well as poor Blacks and poor Appalachians and poor Native Americans, had some common problems that historically they've been pitted against each other. And as we look at this current movement today, it is poor whites that are being inflamed against people of color. And as long as we have these conversations about us versus them, and don't try to identify these common grounds, that yes, poor whites are also not getting into our colleges. And poor whites have also suffered historically. And poor whites are not getting the jobs, all right? And poor Blacks and poor Islamic and Islam, Muslims and poor Native Americans, okay? All right, and if we are actually going to make this dream a reality, I find it strange, and I'll shut up here, that here we are 50 years later still talking about the dream when we should be talking about the solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Great questions and great answers to the questions.
Yeah, can I add some more?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, for in my opinion, I think the easy way to change is start from ourselves. Simple and without, because we actually should be able to change ourselves, and sometimes difficult to change others. So therefore, we have to start with ourselves. As a Muslim, for example, people hear some things, from the news, etc. Maybe it's not right, but as a Muslim, we, myself, for example, have to really show people that this is Muslim about. So we are a good people. We want peace, and we have to show this. And I hope it will change other people feeling or thinking about opinion about Islam. And so far, as I mentioned before, I am very grateful that I'm living in an area that people, I have a very supportive about Islam. Our neighbor is very good neighbor. The school, the children that our children go to school is very supportive. And the facts, like for example, as a Muslim, we have a weekly gathering on Friday, which is 2 p.m. and this is school day. And this, we don't have any difficulty to ask the principals, starting from elementary school, middle school until high school. Our kids don't have a problem to ask permission to go to Friday prayer between 2 until 3 o'clock, and they give us that permission. This is really grateful for us. So I think, again, we should start from ourselves, and then after that we can, cooperate with other organizations, and then, make our movement as included in the nation. Like I mentioned before, as a Muslim, I like that America, include our religious celebrations on their national holiday, because other religions, they also have national holiday for them, but as a Muslim, we don't have that yet. So this is maybe kind of movement that we try. In some big city, we already have that, permission and holiday in the city or state, like in New York, they have a holiday for Islam celebration day. So I think that's from me. Thank you, Dina.
Thank you, Agus. In closing, John, this question is for you, and you talked on it earlier. The celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King Day is celebrated in many ways. One way is by using this time as a day of service rather than a day off. John, you spoke earlier about the Community Remembrance Project. How can others get involved in that?
You're on mute.
Be glad for them to email me. I guess it's the easiest way right now, and our phone number's in the book, 886-8851. We'd be very happy to have others to join the group. We've had some folks from Pike County. Rob Music has been with us, and it may be that this project could be expanded to the nearby counties, but the Community Remembrance Project, we welcome having some others. We are meeting monthly, I think on the third Tuesday. In fact, I think there's a meeting coming up in the next week on Tuesday night. But you all have my email, so just contact me, I think, at this point, and we'll put you on the list. We have some work that we need to do, some paperwork to more formally align ourselves with the Equal Justice Initiative. They have an application process. They've been very helpful, and I think the more people we can get involved, both minorities and others, the better this project will be. Because eventually we do want to memorialize where these lynchings are with local markers, and there's still a lot of information that we need to dig up. So thank you for the question, and feel free to contact me. I appreciate that.
Put your email in the chat.
Put my email in the chat, says Jean. I will do that.
Yes, Rob put it in the chat for you.
Oh, good.
So people, and
Thank
if
you.
anybody watching today, John Rosensberg contact information is in the chat, so as well as Rodney Coates.
And I think
Katrina?
this is great information because as we continue to build our partnership with Big Sandy, there's an interest in, I know at least from the University of Pikeville Diversity Office, to make this a day of service, make this an opportunity. So we'll be looking for more opportunities to serve the community in honor of Dr. King. So Rob, is there anything in our chat, any questions? We're opening up for our chat for questions for any of our panelists.
No questions at this time. We had over 60 people participate, so a lot of engagement. I think a lot to think about.
Could I mention the project while we're, and it's a cooperative project with Pike and Big Sandy, and that is that we have a reentry group here that has been able to hire a social worker, and the objective is to work with prisoners in our local Floyd County Jail to help them with reentry and to make sure that when many of those folks are in recovery and are there for violent offenses, we're trying to develop a bail project so we don't have people sitting in jail for nonviolent offenses who haven't been tried, who are not found guilty, but are just there because they can't raise the $500 or $1,000 for bond. And Professor Rugless at the county, I think, is going to have some students there, and Big Sandy to interview prisoners and to look at the circumstances which have gotten them there and provide us with more information. But basically to try to get these folks who are there for nonviolent offenses back home where they can get housing and where they're not breaking up their families and where they can look to a better future. And again, if that's something that folks would like to contact me about, I'm glad to put them in touch with others. But it's an important project, and I think one that needs to go on in other counties as well. Along with, many of us would like to see cash bail eliminated as it is in the federal system. But it's just another community project where folks are volunteering their time to help us.
That is wonderful. Thank you, John. At this time, we're going to turn it over to Rob Music.
Okay, well, on behalf of UPIKE and Big Sandy, we thank you so much for joining us. And the last thing we'll do is a shameless plug as the conversation continues. Tomorrow at 11 o'clock via Zoom, 11 o'clock tomorrow, Dr. Rodney Coates will be with us, particularly spending 45